Hello, my name is Chris Hayes, and I am sitting in from the University of Louisville for this edition of My Thoughts Monday. Now, what I'd like to talk about today is a concept or perhaps a tactic that I like to refer to as addressing the elephant in the room. And really all I mean by that is at the start of a session, whether it be weight room, conditioning, even on the practice field, is addressing any thoughts or doubts that the athletes, that given team may have about something as acute or local as the training session, or something as global as the training week, the training phase, and just where they are in the year. It's the idea of basically telling them, hey, I know how you feel, I know what you're thinking, here's why that's okay, or here's why you shouldn't feel that way, and justify it accordingly. I think it can give them, before we dive into it a little more specifically, I think giving them that level of understanding, perhaps justification and relatedness, being able to relate on some level to what they're thinking, perhaps what they're going through, I think can help for the greater cause of buy-in, which I hope we can all agree is a very important component of the training process and what an athlete can get out of their training. So an example of this, I think, would be great to use with exercise specificity, meaning surely what we do in the weight room in particular, we hope, will have some degree of transfer, hopefully a high degree of transfer, to the practice field, court, turf, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, of course, we are physical preparation coaches, and probably more important, general preparation coaches, because the truly specific coaches are the sport coaches. Now, there may be a few exceptions like swimming, track and field, where what we are doing is extremely close, if not identical at sometimes to the sport, right? But for the most part, we're general physical preparation coaches. So there's never going to be, or rarely is there going to be exercises that are truly sport specific. But there's certainly a spectrum that we can live on from more general to more specific, right? So I think addressing with a team, particularly if it's in a GPP type phase, and saying, hey, I know this exercise has nothing to do with your sport. This exercise has nothing to do with anything you will ever do on your court, your field of play. But we're doing it because X, fill in the blank, right? It could be physiology, it could be biomechanical, it could be psychological, right? There's millions of reasons we could use an exercise or set a rep scheme. And I think as long as we truly believe in what we're doing and why we're doing it, we should be able to, I don't even like to use or want to use the word sell because I don't think that's the right word, but we should be able to justify what we're doing on that day to and with the athlete. And I think addressing that on the front end, right, and saying, hey, I know what you're thinking, right? This has nothing to do with your sport. That's okay. This is why we're doing it. And perhaps right now it doesn't seem like it has something to do with your sport, or it doesn't seem specific, right? But in a few weeks or a few months, a few phases down the line, this is what this exercise or this even set a rep scheme is going to take us to, right? This work capacity for maybe an entirely anaerobic sport, right? Take like a thrower or a diver. This work capacity phase that we're going through right now, these sets of 10 and 15, no, it's not going to necessarily make you a better thrower today, but it's going to prepare us for the stresses that are placed in our training down the line that will allow you to recover better, and by recovering better, be able to train more and train harder, right? So just being able to relate that and kind of put the dots together, so to speak, for the athlete, that's just one example. But I think that's something that is invaluable. And certainly we shouldn't have to do that every day or even every week necessarily, but being able to identify those spots when you have time and when it's appropriate, I think can be invaluable in the athlete's buy-in and to a degree, really, to the mutual trust and mutual respect. Now, of course, that should be there without having to explain those things, right? But I think doing something like this can contribute to that respect and that trust that needs to be there between athlete and coach, respectively, both ways. All right. I think another good example of this can come perhaps with, this could be off-season, this could be preseason, it could be even be in-season, right, where the team, the athletes, globally, as a group, are really fatigued or they're down in the dumps. They just had a really tough match or a really tough practice, and we're in the weight room the next day or 2 days later, and they're still tired from it, right? And we need to explain to them, perhaps, at times, why we are in the weight room when they're still under fatigue or they're still sore from said practice or said game or match. But just being able to say, hey guys, I know you're still sore. I got you. Like, I'm not naive to that, right? I feel your pain. But we still need to be in here and get a training effect and do what we're going to do today for insert A, B, C, X, Y, and Z, right? And again, if we believe in what we're doing and we know what we're doing and why we're doing it, that should be an easy sell. And I think just addressing that up front with the athletes, again, at the beginning, taking a few minutes at the beginning of a session, can get rid of those negative thoughts and doubts that may be creeping into their head, and hopefully give them a light bulb moment that says, okay, coach knows that we're tired, but here I understand, I still understand now, or I understand now why we're doing what we're doing, why we need to be in the weight room, why we need to be picking up barbells or doing whatever the exercises are that day, right? Or as the coach, if you've made adjustments based on the previous practice or game or based on the upcoming practice or game, you can say, hey, I know you guys just got, beat down against so-and-so, or we're in the dumps, or we have a huge match in 3 days against so-and-so, right? So these are the adjustments I've made. It hopefully was already a part of your macro plan, your annual plan, your global plan, but thinking about it more acutely, more closely, you said, you know what, we need to change this. So letting the athletes know, hey, we made this adjustment behind the scenes because of X, Y, or Z, then lets them know and gives them the justification or the reinforcement of, okay, coach knows what's going on, right? Coach knows our practice demands, our game demands. He knows where we're at this part of the season or the off-season training. And I don't think this needs to be done. I don't think it should be necessary. But perhaps, unfortunately, I think it is necessary at times with today's generation. And really, I'm a part of that generation, having been an athlete just a few years ago and having known what I thought at times about decisions that my coaches made. And I can't relate to what athletes were like 10 to 20 years ago. I don't know if we're softer today or not than we used to be. Surely many would say that we are. But I think the reality is that today's athletes, today's people really, but today's athletes, particularly kids, teenagers, collegiate athletes, they crave justification. They crave a degree of autonomy. They crave a degree of understanding. And I think if we go back to Simon Sinek's book of Start With Why, a lot of that comes back to knowing your why. And you have to know that on an individual level, what your own individual why is, your purpose, right? But we can also peel back the layers and go a little deeper into why we're doing this and why we're doing that, or why we're not doing something. So again, just to kind of wrap this up and bring it back to a global perspective, I think a lot can be said for addressing the elephant in the room. And maybe it's not an elephant. Maybe it's something a little smaller than an elephant, right? Maybe it's not that big. But even if it's just a little thing, if you can nip it in the butt before it festers and becomes a bigger thing, whether it has to do with training or just the state of the union, so to speak, the state of the team, the program, if you can address those things just on a very dosed level, as needed, as you feel needed by the coach, as the coach, I think that can do a lot for the buy-in, for the trust, the mutual trust and respect between the coach and athlete, and ultimately, those things will contribute, in my opinion, to the outcomes of the training process and the training program. So those are my thoughts today. I hope you can take something from that benefits you and your athletes. I appreciate you listening, and I appreciate everything that Jay is doing with CVAPs and for the field. So thank you. Have a great Monday. Have a great week. Take care.